Today, we've got Fernando Ortega on the 90s Worship Podcast. I don't know how many of you have the sound of his voice and the sweet melodies of some incredible, rich hymns that have been reimagined in many ways. Sometimes just with like the sweet acoustic guitars or strings or keyboards or things like that. I can definitely remember being so impacted by the sound of this man's voice in my early years. In fact, just preparing for this interview that I was going to have, I went into Spotify, started listening to some of the songs, and you know how it is when you hear some music and it just brings you right back into those tender moments of your lives. So we're doing a lot of that with the 90s Worship Podcast, and being able to talk to these people who made these songs and hear the stories and even find out what's going on in their lives now. So this is Fernando Ortega. I'm sure that you will recognize many of the songs and melodies that he's brought into our world of worship. So we're going to go in. Here we go. Fernando, so nice to have you. And hey, you're looking great in your little studio there with all the lighting and some old pictures behind you, and maybe a keyboard or piano. What's the room that you're
That's
actually in?
that's an old organ, one of those reed organs that they
Wow.
used to lift onto a wagon and take to the park and set up, do church service or wedding or whatever they were doing. I don't know.
Wow. Is that like one of those you have to pump, or how do you make the sound?
Yeah, it has pedals that you have to pump,
Wow.
and it was built in 1889. And I found it in a antique store on one of the streets here in my town, and it was like, I don't know, $300 because it
Huh.
didn't work.
Yes.
And then I had it rebuilt by a guy who lives up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who does that all the time. And he just made it sound fantastic. He tuned it for me. And so I've used it on several recordings and
You
other
have.
people's recordings. Oh, yeah.
Oh, could you just tell me like what would be an example of a couple recordings if we wanted to hear the sound of that organ? Can you think of any offhand?
You wouldn't. Well, my friend Bernard Chadwick is the first one that comes to mind. He's a worship leader in Pasadena, California. I recently played it on several pieces on his new worship record, which isn't out yet. I
Yeah.
don't even know the name of it, to be honest. But I
Huh.
played piano, and played this organ on it. And
Yes.
the other recordings are ones you wouldn't hear, I don't think,
Right.
except for my own.
Right.
Like
Right.
I used it a lot on this record called "The Crucifixion of Jesus" that came
Hmm.
out in 2017.
Mm-hmm. Would you say it seems like in your musical history, you seem to have been open to some of the more, cultured instruments, the sounds, the sort of Celtic folk. I don't know what you would actually call it, but that is something that sort of, evokes the style of music that you've brought into our worship liturgy. Would you say musically, what have you been kind of like drawn to different instruments?
Well, my favorite, outside of the piano, which is my instrument, my
Yeah.
favorite instrument to play with, to write for, to sing with is the cello.
Wow.
So almost, I would say 95% of the concerts I do are with a cellist. I have
Hmm.
two that I work with all the time, four in the pool, but two that I primarily work with, Kara Fox and Cameron Stone, both
Hmm.
incredible players. And so the cello is like, I think, the most like the human voice,
Yeah.
or maybe the male human voice. So people, feel longing in it, and they're able to like identify with it on some kind of emotional level. Music is so weird how that is, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I would say that seems to characterize your so much of your music. When I would listen to songs and arrangements that you've done, I feel like my heart it's almost like I want to cry, but it's not like a sad cry. It's more like I'm connecting with something very human, very tender.
Hmm.
And that's something that I feel like evokes from your approach to these music and many hymn arrangements that you've made, where it's like, wow, that just so connects to me as in a personal way. Is that something intentional, or that's just the style you prefer? Tell me about what you're trying to do with the arrangements that you bring.
That's such an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever been intentional about
Hmm.
trying to, it, make people cry, as you say. um, but people do. I mean, I think that I've tried to take the most difficult seasons in my life
Yeah.
and and write words that are about that. And I think that, because of my background in classical music for so many years, and still that's primarily what I listen to around here. But um, I think that it has just ended up that way. That the different idioms I use, the different instruments, seem
Mm-hmm.
to pull that kind of thing out of people. I don't know. And I also, when you were talking just now, one thing that one person that has been instrumental in kind of helping me find that voice was John Schreiner,
Hmm.
who I think I've made 24 records now, and he was instrumental producer, co-writer, mix engineer for like 19 of those records.
Mm-hmm.
So so he has a great sense of that as well. Where we were, you know, there was a time when Christian music seemed all about this kind of um, desire to express victory or triumph or
Mm-hmm.
joy. Um, he and I were writing about things that were more, I don't know, less so, less escapist in that way.
Right.
And if that makes sense, I don't know.
It
Not trying to
totally does.
put down any other kind of music,
No.
but that's what we were interested in.
No, and I mean, and you have done that so well. Like I'd like to maybe if we could just explore a couple of songs in particular. The one I feel like I most identify with you, and yet I don't even think you wrote it, is "Give Me Jesus."
Oh,
That's a
nice.
song that just looking here we've got several different arrangements of it in praise charts. But can you just can you tell me a little bit about what you know of this song? Looks like it was written by Fanny Crosby. I would almost feel like if I listened to it, I would say, "Oh, Fernando Ortega wrote that song," but I
Right,
don't
and
think you did.
it wasn't written by Fanny Crosby either.
Oh no. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I need to. Well, you tell me, and then I'll make some
Okay.
corrections here.
So it was a hymn I grew up singing in the Presbyterian church since I was a little kid.
Yes.
And we used to sing it in the morning when I rise, in the morning when I rise. It was kind
Yes.
of had that feel. Um, and so, first of all, it's a slave song. It was written by
Hmm.
generations of slaves. It's a spiritual,
Yep.
and there are all kinds of verses. I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 verses that you can find in various hymnals. But I chose 3 that really moved me.
Yep.
So I grew up singing it. I never was particularly moved by it as a kid. But one night, I had joined Campus Crusade for Christ staff in 1984, living in Pasadena. There was a large church near where I was living. I was living with some Campus Crusade fellow missionaries' house with them and their kids. But Lake Avenue Congregational Church was a really vibrant church back in the late '80s, early '90s. And I walked into a service. It was a Maundy Thursday service,
Hmm.
and Dan Bird was the choir conductor back then, one of the best choir men in the country back then. And he's still really great, but he doesn't really conduct anymore. But anyway, they sang "Give Me Jesus." I was up in the pews, and I immediately recognized it. But all of a sudden, it was this beautiful, stirring, soul-stirring, moving song that just made me ache inside. And I came
Hmm.
down to the altar, and they had kneelers there. As I recall, maybe it was just steps, but I was only 26 then. And And so I started, you know, playing around with it on the piano. And I ended up with an arrangement that I did in concert for a long time. And then I recorded it with John Schreiner, and we had our arrangement that we did that was it's mostly guitar driven,
Yes.
but with a lot of piano in it. And then my arrangement that everybody knows, or that most people are familiar with who know my music, um, came sometime in the early '90s, maybe like around '93 or '94.
And did you change the melody, like what you just sung for me? Did you modify that then in your, or you just made some slight adjustments? Because this is something I think you may do. Is I want to talk about some of these other arrangements that you've done. But are you thinking about just subtle shifts that you might make melodically or chord wise? That
I think with this song, I don't even remember how the exact melody goes in the Presbyterian hymnal. I'll have to look it up.
right?
I've heard other artists do it in a different meter.
Yes.
I do it in 4/4. Like
Huh.
Jeremy Camp does it. I can't remember the other artists who performed it that have slightly different melodic turns,
Yes.
which makes me wonder if I even did it the way I was supposed to. But I did it, I guess, the way it just came out. I did it from memory from when I was a little kid, when we recorded it, but
Yes.
maybe my memory was a little bit, off. So
Yes.
I don't know how I ended up here. I'd be interested to go back and find the original music and see what I did to it.
Well, and this is the way, like songs that if this was an old African, spiritual, where they were just singing it out on the fields or whatever, songs were just passed on by how they heard them. They weren't writing them down, and then songs morph and adjust and
Mhm.
flow, and this is the beautiful thing about these public domain hymns, where you have all the freedom that you want to take the song and interpret it in a way that but I mean, you did a beautiful work with that song for sure.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
I was, traveling the world with Anne Graham Lotz.
Yeah.
She loves this song. Anne Graham Lotz is Billy Graham's daughter, and so at every event she had me sing this
Mm-hmm.
song several times.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she named her entire program the "Just Give Me Jesus"
Mm.
revival. She called it.
Mm-hmm. I'd
So we
love to
took that
talk about
program.
a few more songs. Now I was looking on Praise Charts, and
Yeah.
unfortunately I didn't find more in Praise Charts. Which, just so you know, I just went to my publishing manager today and I gave her a screenshot of all of this, and I was like, we need to get more of this music into Praise Charts, because so many people are looking for just accessible devotional hymn arrangements, and I can tell that clearly Jesus paid it all. I was just listening to that, and some of these, like that I will sing of my Redeemer, I remember learning that from a worship leader, and now I'm discovering that his arrangement clearly was influenced by your arrangement, and
Oh,
it just
really?
made the song so I don't know, beautiful to my spirit. I just love what you have done. So I mean, can we just talk about a few of these songs, and maybe what you, how you kind of interpreted them or how you've used them? Jesus paid it all. That's a song where we have many arrangements, but yours
Hmm.
is very beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I love that hymn.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I don't remember how that arrangement came about, and the one I do now is kind of morphed a little bit, but
Yes.
and I don't sing it that often, but it's a very deeply moving hymn. I remember singing it last year at um, Redeem the Park Cities Presbyterian in Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
and I did it with a string quartet. The music minister there, J. Marty Cope, wrote the string arrangement, and it was very beautiful. But I just recall singing it, and there was a man who must have been in his 80s in the front pew who just like, when we got Jesus paid it all, when we got to the chorus, that was terrible what I just did.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but he just started weeping.
Hmm.
Uh, and you never know what. someone's going through or how someone responds to a lyric. But I just thought in that moment, he's reflecting on his life and just
Mm-hmm.
being thankful
Mm-hmm.
for his redemption. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, and interesting, you were just saying that some of the music and arrangements and song selection that you've brought as kind of a contrast to the world seem to be moving into a joy, victory, dancing, all like there's a lot of music, and we're not certainly critiquing that, but it's just we need more than that, or we certainly need songs that can move the very human, broken, painful parts in us. And I would say that for those of us, if you go to a church and it's all just victory, rah rah, eventually your heart tires out because you're like, I don't identify with this. I'm just broken right now because whatever we trying to get pregnant, we can't have a child, or my child just, I don't know, died, or my mom, or there's so many human experiences that we have that we then associate um, to music. This is what music does: is it meets us in these places. And I'll just say
Well, I
this,
like
and then
that.
I'll let you say. Someone was just
Okay.
telling me this last week that over the course of a lifetime, they were saying statistically, songs that are joyful, rowdy songs in the course of a life, if they really like the song, they'll listen to it about 100 times. But
Hmm.
songs that meet them in their pain, that are more sorrowful, they will listen to over the course of their life 1,000 times. Can you imagine the vast difference of that and what that speaks
That's
to
really
how
something.
music meets us in the emotions that we have in life, and even how much more important the painful seasons of our life can be when it comes to music.
Yeah, and one hymn that came to mind when you were saying all that was,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned it already. I will sing of my Redeemer,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when after I left the Presbyterian Church, I became Pentecostal, and then I became a Baptist when the Pentecostal church imploded. But in the Baptist church, we used to sing, "I will sing of my Redeemer," like I
Yes.
will sing of my Redeemer and His wonders, like that.
Yeah. Kind of
And
marching like. Yeah.
in that, it was a triumphant hymn. But I heard in it, and when I started arranging it in that da 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 da, that kind of like little arpeggiated ostinato pattern,
Yeah.
um, more of a plaintiveness.
Yes.
I will tell the wondrous story how my lost estate to save. In his boundless love and mercy, he the ransom freely gave.
Mm-hmm.
I like it more plaintive than
Mm-hmm.
because it puts us in a place of humility before God.
Mm-hmm.
So people, I just recently sang that at a conference, and people were so moved because they had not heard it that way before. They had only heard it,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, the
Can I just ask,
triumphant
because
way.
I'm interested, sometimes I get into music nerdy things, but is that a song that blends together 6/8 and 4/4? Does the meter change in the chorus, or maybe it doesn't? Because I will
Oh no, it does for
sing
sure.
of my redeem, and then it goes, sing, oh sing.
1, 2,
So
3,
something changes
4.
there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes from 9/8, which could
Yes.
also be considered like 3/4, but subdivided in threes in triplets,
Yes.
to 12/8, which also could be
Okay.
four.
Right.
So, and that throws people off a lot of times. They're
Yes.
like, they're ready to plow into the chorus in 9/8, and it just doesn't work. But
Right.
yeah,
But your approach of slowing the song down and making it more contemplative or reflective makes that meter change less abrupt. It's like, because people aren't, I don't feel like I just want to lunge into it. That's why I've loved your arrangement so much. And I think it's such a unique element of a hymn. To how many songs change meters like that? I mean, I know sometimes you could add a 2/4 into a 4/4 whatever song, but this is a distinctive different lilt in the chorus, which helps it to kind of set apart. sing of my Redeemer. And then the verses are more like, maybe they're more about me. I'm not I can't remember the lyrics of all the song, but there's a
Yeah,
contrast there between the chorus and verse.
yeah, no, that's a good point. There are, in a lot of hymns, especially like modern hymns, Keith Getty hymns,
Yeah,
there's often meter changes,
yeah,
but there are also like hymns that come to mind might be A Mighty Fortress. I think you have to, there's some funky counting that goes on in that. And people
mm-hmm,
have tried to compensate for um, those meter changes by kind of altering how it's sung. But yeah, some of those hymns do have those kind of weird
mm-hmm,
changes from
mm-hmm,
4/4 to all of a sudden to 6/4, then back to 4/4 the next measure.
mm-hmm. But this is why we have people like yourself who, clearly you're sitting down and taking the time to arrange these songs, and ultimately you want to make them accessible for people to be able to sing and rediscover. And I feel like when we're listening to your songs, I can both feel like I'm listening to something new and fresh, and also remembering something that has rich heritage. And somehow the two feel like they come together and connect deep in my spirit. So that's what I see, a tremendous offering that you bring to the church. Does that feel like
Wow,
reflective
thank
of
you.
who you are?
I think so. I'm
Yeah.
a mess of a person. I
Oh,
mean, I've always been. I'm a musician. I'm hyper emotional. I'm hypersensitive. I'm
oh,
insecure.
yeah,
So that's what I've looked for in music of faith, is things
yeah,
that comfort me, or that speak, whatever thing I'm going through. I don't know.
huh?
Like I said, I'm a mess, so that's what I look for, healing songs
Right.
when I arrange stuff.
Well, can I just ask you a little more about that? When you say I'm a mess, or you're insecure, or like how I think people looking in, they would think, well, how could Fernando Ortega be insecure? Does he know who he is? Do
Oh
you
gosh.
know the impact that you have had on a generation of people? What does that look like for you, though? Is it when you step on stage, or is it when you're in a small group? When do you feel the most fragile in a social space?
In a social space, um, wow, that's a really interesting question. It's not so much when I'm performing or
No.
or or, or leading worship. I don't really. The lyrics will make me. If I'm singing "Jesus paid it all to Him I owe, sin had left a crimson stain," I'll definitely feel that while I'm singing it, and be
Yeah.
cognizant of why it's moving me so much.
Yeah.
But I would say, you know, I'm most vulnerable when I'm in just like one-on-one or small group settings,
Hmm.
you know, where I feel just. I don't have social phobias anymore, but I used to have terrible social phobias. Just,
Hmm.
um, and they lasted for maybe 10, 15 years, where I just had
Right.
a very hard time. Like having a talk like this would be really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm past that now. Uh, I think. And I don't know when it went, but it did finally, change. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't feel particularly. I remember being on tour with Sarah Groves and Bebo Norman,
Mm-hmm.
and in those days, Bebo was really struggling with stage fright,
Hmm.
and and I was struggling with something akin to. Um, where I really had to go on the tour bus, lie in my bunk and just pray that God would get me through my 25-minute set or a 30-minute
Right.
set or whatever I was doing.
Yeah.
Because I felt so fragile. So going on stage, I felt very alone, like
Yeah.
lonely is a better word.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's incredible pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And that also disappeared after a while.
Right.
I I don't think for Bebo, I don't know. I saw him recently, somewhat recently, and he seemed to be just doing great.
Yeah. I often tell a story of like when I was leading worship regularly at church, but between services, I remember this one service. I went into the back behind the stage. There's a little prayer room in the back, got on the floor, and I was like praying, God, please don't make me go back out there for the second
Oh,
service, because I just felt so exposed, so sensitive to how people were responding. There's like so many things, very alone in my kind of responsibility to want to make something
hmm.
meaningful. Um,
Oh,
but
wow.
then I wonder if sometimes we just need to tell people this like that. I hope you don't mind me probing a little bit, and because I feel like this humanity that you're revealing to us, it makes your music make sense. That's the connection that I feel. I wouldn't get this from
Huh.
someone that's like, oh, I got life by the tail and everything is successful. I mean, you wouldn't write these songs if that was your life.
Yeah, that's so interesting what you're saying. There was a time, especially when I was in my 20s and 30s, where I would just pray for a power outage or
Yeah.
a tornado or something, anything to make me not have to go out and sit in front of that crowd and sing. As
Mm-hmm.
much as I enjoyed it, as much as once I was out there and the whole thing was, we were coming to a close and it was successful, it was great feeling. But that was years and years of me just like, and sometimes my prayers did come true.
Yes.
I don't remember reasons where concerts were canceled at the last minute, but
Yes.
it was always a relief to me. It's terrible.
Oh yeah. Best Christmas Eve of my life was 1997, 4 o'clock. There was 4 feet of snow, and they canceled the service. And I was like, "Thank you, Lord." I am. Oh,
Sorry, my
see,
dog's
even your
just.
dog likes that. I am
Oh,
going home. I am gonna lay by the Christmas tree and just rest my weary spirit because I did not want to go. It's just I'm sure people
oh
could
my.
identify with that, but anyways, Fernando, I so value the work that you have done, the life work that you've done. It's had a significant impact on my own life. I'm almost sad to say that I've forgotten how much, because I haven't listened to your music more recently. But then
Hmm.
this morning, as I put a few of the songs on, and I could remember, for example, for me, it would have been the era of the 90s when you had cassette tapes and you would just stick one
Ah,
in the player and you would just play the same music over and over and over. And so some of
ah,
those songs just became embedded into my spirit. And
hmm.
your music really connects with me that way. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I just
Yeah.
would want to ask you, this is kind of on the spot, but as you look at worship leaders in our modern day, from the happy dancing, joyful ones to the ones who are broken in the small churches and would love a Sunday off, like what's the what's the heart message that you feel like you would want to offer as encouragement to people leading worship right here in this day and age today that we're in? Is there a few words you'd have?
I would. A huge one would be reading good theologians.
Hmm.
The first one that comes to mind because I like what he says about worship is N.T. Wright. I always get it
Okay.
wrong if it's surprised by joy or is it
Yes.
surprised by hope. I can't remember. There's one C.S. Lewis and then there's,
Right.
but that book really helped me a lot. I also really like Fleming Rutledge. She's an Anglican priest who says a lot of great things. I just think it's important to stay close to theological minds, um,
Right.
you know, that are bigger than your own,
Right.
and yeah. It's just so you won't lose the way. I mean, musicians tend to be emotional, so they write out of their emotions, and sometimes the emotions don't always line up with maybe say the harder things of in scripture,
Right. Right.
Um, and then I also think community is really important for worship leaders because we get exhausted. I've been a worship leader. I've worked in churches for my whole life. I'm not currently working in one, but we get exhausted and we feel isolated. Um, and so, a community of people to encourage, to keep you, help you keep your nose clean, and
Yeah, grounded.
yeah, that's really important to me too. I say that, and then I'm such a introvert and isolationist, but I'm trying. My daughter
Right.
always, I complain sometimes about not having enough friends, and my daughter says you have so many friends that you never, you
Right.
don't stay in touch with, and she's right.
Right.
But so that's one. I'm preaching to the choir here. So
Yeah. Well, it can be very easy and almost, the facade of when you're in front of so many people and there's this sense of being connected, and yet the stage can be a lonely place. We have to be very intentional about reaching out and finding people not on the stage. And that was a message that you had brought through
very much.
earlier
Yeah.
on. So thank you for that. It's
Mm.
a good word.
Yeah.
And, but there is something about a worship leader who feels that sense of uh, rawness, or like you were saying, the isolation, or just when you don't feel like you have your life all together and you're leading worship out of that kind of brokenness. People
Mm.
hear that and they receive that. It's very disarming. And so even in your music, there's some of that I wouldn't want you to change, Fernando. I
Oh,
appreciate the person that you are, and that you're willing to share and say, hey, this is who I am. Here's some things I'm kind of struggling with, and makes you
mm.
relatable, right? And we need relatable, real worship leaders out there in this world.
Very true. Yeah. I think of like Jeremy from Bethel.
Yeah. Jeremy Riddle.
Oh, Jeremy Riddle. I
Yeah.
heard something of him singing the other day. Oh, and I just was driving down the road and just burst into tears. It was so
Oh,
beautiful, filled with
really?
longing. And then I recently discovered John Guerra. I know he's been around a while,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
boy, that new album called Jesus is full of really beautiful theological
Yes.
moments.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Fernando, for encouraging us with your music. I'm glad you're still around. You're still writing music. If you come back to Praise Charts in a couple of months, we're going to have way more of your songs, because I feel like we're missing a huge treasure there. I love your treatment of so many of these old hymns. I will sing of my Redeemer, for sure. Praise to the Lord the Almighty. This is my Father's world. Jesus paid it all. I mean, so many beautiful songs among the songs that you've written, new lyrics, new melodies as well. So beautiful.
Think of Immortal Invisible also. I really like how that one turned out.
Yes. All right. That's a tough one to make singable, and reachable for a congregation. There's so many
I
meters and
I
rhythms and
agree.
melodies, but what a
Yeah.
giant song that is for the ages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, this is
Yeah.
Ryan Dahl, Fernando Ortega, the 90s Worship Podcast. I hope that you have been encouraged by this conversation, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.